are the strongest weapons throughout the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. And in House of the Dragon, we see this at its peak, where these scaled monsters are fighting to their death. So today, we are going to rank and reveal every dragon story from their birth to death, starting with Balerion the Black Dread. This beast was born before House Targaryen even moved from Valyria to Dragonstone, where, along with 4 other dragons, Aenar Targaryen saved them from the Great Doom. We're talking about 114 years before his descendant Aegon's conquest of Westeros. However, Balerion was the only survivor of these 5 OG dragons, and its insane power is highlighted with him playing a crucial role in Aegon's victory. For example, burning Harrenhal to the point where the stones themselves melted by his black flame. His scales were dark as coal, and his wingspan was so vast it could black out the sun. When it came to size, Balerion's teeth were said to be as tall as longswords, nearing 36 inches each, and its mouth being so huge that a horse could ride into it, even swallowing a mammoth whole. Balerion's power spoke with his age, as he outlived Aegon, being passed down to his second son, Maegor, then to Princess Aira, and finally Viserys, when the Black Dread would die of old age 94 years after Aegon's conquest. All in all, he lived over 200 years, ranking in at S tier, yet still he probably wasn't the strongest dragon. But before we get to that, we have Aegon's sister wife's Meraxes, who was born in Dragonstone about 85 to 114 years ago on Dragonstone before the conquest, and its rider was Rhaenys the First. Like Balerion, Meraxes played a fundamental role for the Targaryens to establish their rule in Westeros. However, Meraxes comparatively met an early end alongside Rhaenys herself during the First Dornish War, which happened 10 years after the conquest. Meraxes' death would go down in history, reminding ordinary folk that dragons are not invincible, and a device like a scorpion bolt can game in. But due to this early death at just over 100 years old, and not even death at the hands of another dragon, we have to put Meraxes at the top of B tier. But the first dragon we learn of that died at the hands of another is Quicksilver, who was claimed and ridden by Aegon's son Aenys Targaryen I in 7 AC. However, in 42 AC, Aenys the king at the time died, with his brother Maegor taking the throne for himself, while Aenys' children were left with nothing. This is Game of Thrones though, so after sneaking into the dragon pit to claim his father's Quicksilver, Aenys' son, Aegon the Uncrowned, attempted to win back the throne, which was quickly halted when Maegor, flying on the back of Balerion, ambushed. With Quicksilver being 4 times smaller than Balerion, it was a quick battle, as with one claw strike, Quicksilver's wings were left in tatters, causing it to fall hundreds of feet onto the ground, killing him and his rider. But with its age being about 36 years old, which makes Quicksilver older than a lot of the dragons in the series, and especially during the dance, and alongside the hubris of Aenys thinking he could take on Balerion with Quicksilver and some of his other dragons like his sister's Dreamfire, it's safe to put honestly, Quicksilver is probably C tier. But another dragon who could have bodied Quicksilver similar to Balerion is Vhagar, who was born around 52 years before the conquest in Dragonstone. Vhagar was as massive as they come, being second only to Balerion in size and power. It was ridden by Aegon's second sister wife, Queen Visenya Targaryen, until her death in 44 AC. It remained unridden until 73 AC, where Balon Targaryen claimed and rode her until his death in 101 AC. Vhagar was eventually claimed by Laena Velaryon, who rode the dragon until her own death in 120 AC. Shortly afterwards, Vhagar's final rider was Prince Aemon Targaryen until 130 AC, where they both died in battle against Caraxes above the God's Eye in the most notable battle dubbed the Dance of the Dragons. However, living a long life allowed Vhagar to grow to its fullest and even have eggs, confirming she was a female. With her size, experience, and multiple battles during the dance which went her way, Vhagar is easily S tier. In fact, she was the strongest dragon during the dance, where Vhagar alone is able to go against every single dragon that hatched in the last 10 to 15 years. We saw such an example in season 1 with Arax, who was born between 115 to 120 AC after his egg was placed in the cradle of Prince Lucerys Velaryon. It was written by Lucerys until 129 AC, where they were both killed above Shipbreaker's Bay by Vhagar in one chomp. This was also the catalyst to the whole civil war between the Greens and the Blacks within the House of Targaryen, which would be the start of the fall of dragons in the Song of Ice and Fire. So because it didn't live a long life, we sadly have to put him in F tier. I know it's not really fair as against a beast like Vhagar, it didn't have much of a chance, but if Vhagar is such a monster, then what would make its killer? Well, that would be Caraxes. This dragon was claimed and ridden by Aemon Targaryen from 72 to 92 AC, and due to its ferocity and red scales, it was dubbed as the Bloodworm. Although over 100 years younger than Vhagar, Caraxes compensated for its age difference with pure aggression and combat prowess. But their battle wouldn't ensue until Caraxes was passed down to Prince Daemon Targaryen. During the Dance of the Dragons, it played a huge role in the Battle of the Red Fork, and with Daemon as its rider, it was a complete unit, making Caraxes the most fearsome dragon of his era and strongest one in the Black's camp. Sadly, taking down a legend like Vhagar wasn't an easy task. Rather, Caraxes paid its life as the price, because in 130 AC, along with Daemon, it was killed by Vhagar above the God's Eye, but with just this 1v1 feat alone, Caraxes easily takes the S tier. But another dragon who was just as fierce and had one of the most dragon battles in Song of Ice and Fire is Sunfire, whose egg hatched around 110 to 115 AC, or the year House of the Dragon starts. Although a young dragon during the dance, Sunfire was said to be one of the strongest to have ever lived, as with his rider Aegon II, Sunfire was critical in defeating the queen who never was, Rhaenys, and her dragon the Red Queen Meleys at the Battle of Rook's Nest in 129 AC. Now, the fight between Meleys and Sunfire was almost won by the larger and older dragon, with Sunfire clutched in its jaws, but it was revealed that this whole fight was a 1v2 from the start, because Sunfire was actually a distraction for Vhagar to come and kill one of the fastest and strongest dragons for the Black side. Even though Sunfire didn't win, we did witness just how sturdy he was, as after falling nearly 1,000 feet, Meleys died. Yet Sunfire survived with only a broken wing, which should have been the end of his career, but nope. Even in an injured state, he fired his golden flames upon the soldiers who came to kill him, and later, after healing its wing, Sunfire managed to kill Grey Ghost, who is believed to be older than Sunfire and a fierce wild dragon. Then after making his way to Dragonstone, Sunfire fought against Moondancer, who was faster than him, but through the use of his golden flames, which are able to blind other dragons, Sunfire came out victorious. However, the injuries after 3 dragon battles and falling from such heights finally took its toll, and Sunfire died shortly after, but not before cementing his place on A tier. But as strong as Sunfire seems, there was one dragon that the Maester in Fire and Blood claims to have been able to go toe-to-toe against even Vhagar, Meleys the Red Queen. Meleys was already a grown dragon by the time she found a rider in 75 AC, who was Alyssa Targaryen, the mother of Daemon and Viserys. With her size rivaling other dragons like Vermithor and Caraxes, we can assume her to be near or over 100 years old by the time of the dance. But don't let that fool you, because despite her size, Meleys was the fastest dragon in all of Westeros, where the Maester stated that she could outpace both Vhagar and Caraxes. At that point, she wasn't ridden by Alyssa anymore though, but rather the queen who never was, Rhaenys Targaryen, who claimed the Red Queen in 85 AC. Meleys was so tough that during the Battle of Rook's Rest in 129 AC, she was shot by multiple crossbows and even a scorpion bolt grazed her, which did no damage. Instead, she spat back fire and in one full sweep killed about 800 men. This was a feat not even Meraxes or Rhaegal could survive. But This battle was a trap for the queen, as both Sunfire and Vhagar appeared out of nowhere, starting a 1v2 ambush. These two dragons are the strongest in the Green's party, as I have proven by my glazing. Yet against Melee's, Sunfire is almost killed while herself taking barely any damage. Even Melee's fireballs are described as being bright as the sun and only died after falling 1,000 feet from the air. So with her needing two top tier dragons to jump her for victory, she easily deserves to be on S tier. But Rhaenys' son Seasmoke was one of the first dragons we see in action on House of the Dragon, being 12 to 15 years old during season 1, as its writer Laenor Velaryon bonded with it in 101 AC. Seasmoke played a massive part in winning the Battle of the Stepstones, where he even saved Daemon and eviscerated the Tyarchy forces. However, in 120 AC, Laenor would fake his death and leave the dragon riderless. Now in the books, it's never revealed that Laenor isn't actually dead, so either he will die in season 2 or Seasmoke's story will take a different turn than that of Fire and Blood. Because in 130 AC, Seasmoke once again gains a rider in Adam of Hull. At this point of the dance, the Blacks are on the back foot and need new dragon riders, so an event known as the Sowing happens, where dragon seeds try to claim riderless, free-roaming dragons. So after Adam the Hull successfully mounts Seasmoke, his notable battle occurs in Tumbleton, when the actions of Seasmoke causes the deaths of 2 dragon riders. However, against an enraged Vermithor, the largest living dragon at the time, who would be 3 times Seasmoke's age, not much could be done. Yet, Seasmoke did manage to drag the giant onto the mud, putting him in the middle of C tier. Although Seasmoke is a 30-year-old dragon, Tessarion was born only 10 to 15 years before the dance, and is said to be on a similar scale to Seasmoke, where in 130 AC, he was only 1/3 the size of Vermithor, who was known as the 3rd largest dragon ever. In fact, Tessarion was the last remaining dragon for the Greens at this point, but they still believed he was formidable enough to help retake the Iron Throne for the party, with Daeron Targaryen as her rider. However, the situation escalated during a surprise night attack by Adam Velaryon riding Seasmoke. With the death of Daeron moments before the battle, Tessarion still clashed with Seasmoke, which turned into a sort of a dance until Seasmoke changed direction to jump Vermithor instead. However, Tessarion wasn't the one to stay idle, and charged from the clouds with her fiery breath, causing all 3 dragons to kill each other. Although not a clear victory for her, Tessarion was the last dragon standing and was put out of her misery by an archer the next day. So because of that, she ranks a little bit higher than Seasmoke in C tier. However, the one who killed Seasmoke and should have bodied Tessarion, if not for some sneak attacks, is of course Vermithor. Being one of the oldest dragons during the dance, he was born in 34 AC and was already named a huge dragon in 49 AC, which is fitting as his rider was Jaehaerys Targaryen I, who brought upon the most peaceful 50 years in the history of Westeros. After Jaehaerys' death in 103 AC, Vermithor remained riderless in Dragonmont until 129 AC when the Sowing started. Vermithor too burned all of the candidates that approached him except Hugh Hammer, who wouldn't be riding Vermithor for long, as he was killed before he could mount his dragon during the second battle at Tumbleton. Similar to his rider, Vermithor was also caught off guard while half asleep by knights charging at him. But although wounded, he quickly dispatched them, but this distraction helped Seasmoke to jump the beast, smashing him onto the ground. According to Lord Benjicott Blackwood, Vermithor would have ripped Seasmoke into pieces if not for another dragon showing up, making the battle a 3v-all. Vermithor was caught off guard 2 whole times and eventually died when he tried to fly with his tattered wings whilst carrying the weight of Seasmoke's head in his jaws. With its massive size and the fact that only Balerion and Vhagar were larger dragons, Vermithor is easily top of A tier. Now, Vermithor's lover or mate was Silverwing, being born in 36 AC at the cradle of Alicent Targaryen, who attempted to ride Silverwing beyond the wall 3 times, but the dragon consistently veered off southward, seemingly scared of something beyond. I wonder what it is. After Alicent's death in 100 AC, Silverwing grew to be one of the largest dragons, having never been confined in the dragon pits. Then in 129 AC, Wolf White claimed Silverwing during the sowing. At this point, she was known as a docile dragon, having killed none of the sowing candidates. And this is reflected during one of her only battles in the second bout of Tumbleton, where instead of helping her lover in Vermithor, she decided to not fight at all and just rose high up, flying around for a whole day and night. But after Vermithor's death, Silverwing became feral, attacking anyone who tried to claim her, eventually settling on an island in the Red Lake, where she lived wildly into the reign of Aegon III. Silverwing fought multiple battles and lived to be over 150 years old as one of the last dragons. But because she was such a pussy at fighting, come on, we can't give her more than C tier, alright? Most of these dragons during the dance were honestly nerfed, because a lot of them were kept chained up in the dragon pits or the Red Keep, which stunted their growth. Because dragons like to roam free and hunt, which causes them to grow even larger. One of these free-roaming dragons was Sheepstealer, which was hatched during the younger days of Jaehaerys I, but was still a junior to Vermithor, which lets me estimate its birth to be around the year 50 AC, 40 to 50 AC, so by the time of the dance, Sheepstealer is at least 80 years old. However, he never found a rider and enjoyed hunting sheep as far as Driftmark and even Wendwater. With having no rider, Sheepstealer was quite uneasy around humans, which caused it to kill the most amount of candidates during the sowing. However, he at last found a rider in a Targaryen bastard girl named Nettles, who left out freshly killed sheep every morning for the dragon to grow accustomed to her presence, until finally he allowed her to mount him. After the Battle of the Gullet and the capture of King's Landing, Sheepstealer aided Daemon in hunting down Aemond and Vhagar along the Trident. But after Nettles is named traitor, she and Sheepstealer run away to the Mountain Moon and aren't seen until the end of the dance, when Sheepstealer kills 16 men and vanishes once again. So with barely any fights and the only dragon battle being against the cannibal whose sight alone made him run away, Sheepstealer takes up the spot in C tier. Another free-roaming dragon was Grey Ghost, who is said to be older than Sunfire, but not by much, so we can assume he was likely about 25 to 30 years. But ever since birth, he was a shy dragon and would fly around Dragonmont eating fish. He was so elusive that even during the dance, when the Blacks desperately wanted new dragons, they couldn't find Grey Ghost, until one fateful day when bro came face to face with Sunfire, who tore him limb from limb and partially ate him. With Sunfire already injured during their battle and likely smaller than Grey Ghost, it's pretty obvious this dude deserves a D tier. Now, Grey Ghost's death spelled doom for another dragon, Moondancer, who was around the age of 13, or as we are told, similar to Shrykos, with her rider being Daemon's daughter, Baela Targaryen. So after seeing the corpse of Grey Ghost, Baela thinks she can go hunt down the cannibal who she thinks was responsible. But instead, she comes face to face with my boy Sunfire. Aegon II, who thought he had successfully managed to take over Dragonstone, was confronted by Baela on her Moondancer. Though being less than half its size, due to Sunfire's injuries and crooked wing, this fight was quite fair. In fact, Moondancer even managed to severely wound Sunfire on his back and was nimble enough to dodge most of its attacks. Well, yeah, until she's hit with Sunfire's blinding flames. But hey, even blind, Moondancer took the crippled Sunfire down to the ground, but retrospectively, that was a poor decision, as the ground battle left Moondancer vulnerable to Sunfire's size and weight, where he was killed and eaten. But since Moondancer did some damage, we gotta give her some respect and let her sit in C tier. Stormcloud is another dragon who didn't get much time to shine, as he was only 9 years old, being hatched in the cradle of Aegon the Younger, who took his first fight atop the dragon while escaping warships of the Three Daughters. Although mounted on a dragon, Aegon being so young, he couldn't do much. In fact, Stormcloud died due to being impaled by scorpions and crossbow arrows. Okay, let's give him credit for at least surviving long enough to bring Aegon back to Dragonstone with the wounds, but due to his young age, he still ranks down in F tier. Dreamfire was one of the oldest dragons during the dance, having been born nearly 100 years ago around 32 AC. First, her rider was Aegon the Conqueror's first grandchild, Rhaena Targaryen, meaning Dreamfire spent most of her time during the peaceful reign of King Jaehaerys. Dreamfire saw zero combat and instead was treated as a private jet for Rhaena, who flew her all around Westeros multiple times, with the most notable accomplishment of the dragon being it is heavily hinted that the eggs Dany hatches in Game of Thrones are the 3 stolen eggs of Dreamfire. After the death of Rhaena in 73 AC, Dreamfire didn't bond with another rider until around 120 AC with Helaena. Helaena would often ride Dreamfire and might have been instrumental for the Greens during the dance, if not for her 6-year-old son's death in the Civil War, which caused Helaena to become depressed and eventually alt F4 her life. Soon after, Dreamfire was also devastated with the loss of her rider, and would meet the same fate of death during the storming of the Dragon Pits. This is an event organized by a man named the Shepherd, who rallies all the citizens of King's Landing into killing all the dragons present in the pits because they are sick of this civil war. With all the dragons being shackled, they quickly got overrun by the mob, yet Dreamfire was the only dragon to have broken free and risen hell towards the men. But eventually, the never-ending hordes kept cornering the giant dragon, where she got crushed when the Dragon Pit dome itself collapsed. But Dreamfire killed more people than all the other 3 dragons in the pits combined, and her age being over 100 years, she deserves C tier. The second dragon in the pits was Tyraxes, a 10 to 13-year-old dragon born between 117 to 120 AC. His rider was Joffrey Valerion, or Rhaenyra's youngest son. Even though a pretty big dragon by the dance, Joffrey wasn't allowed to participate in the battles, with Tyraxes only being used as an Uber to fly around. However, during the storming of the pits, Tyraxes killed so many people that the corpses blocked the main entrance. But bro got confused when people showed up from behind him and strangled himself with his own chains. So with 0 combat experience and the pathetic way he died, Tyraxes is in D tier. But Shrykos is even lower, as he never saw combat due to its rider being Aegon II's son Jaehaerys, meaning Shrykos was probably younger than 10 years old when he died during the storming of the Dragon Pits. With it being axed down by a random King's Landing citizen and having a child rider, he deserves F tier. Morgul, the dragon of Jaehaerys' twin sister, was also of the same age as Shrykos and died the same way during the riots. But Morgul at least has a cooler sounding name and managed to kill scores of people and burned his attacker to death. So he might be in F tier, but is ranked the highest. Now, let me tell you about the dumbest dragon. Her name was Syrax, whose leader was none other than Rhaenyra Targaryen. Syrax was at least 30 to 40 years old by the time of the dance, and even in season 1 of Hot D, we see just how massive she has grown, especially that neck. But combat wasn't something she was accustomed to, as Rhaenyra specifically raised her to be passive, with the only battle she was involved in being when the Blacks took over King's Landing, which was a kind of one-sided, so Syrax was definitely not part of any dragon battles, with it being chained up in the Red Keep most of her life. However, during the Dragon Pit incident, Rhaenyra's son Joffrey, the dum-dum, should be evident by the name, thought it would be a good idea to ride his mother's dragon to reach the Dragon Pit to save the other dragons. But instead, Syrax, of course, yeeted him to his death off her back and flew to the pits alone. Now, as a dragon, to save other dragons being mobbed by humans on the ground, how do you fight? Option A, fly down to the ground and breathe fire. Option B, keep flying high and breathe fire. Option C, land on the ground and start using your claws while the people swarm you. Yeah, Syrax picked option C and completely destroyed without being able to save a single dragon. So although big in size and her having a competent dragon rider, Syrax isn't moving above D tier. But Syrax's daughter Mourning ranks even lower, as she was born in the year of her mother's death, 130 AC, and bonded with Daemon's daughter Rhaena. Mourning Morning was way too young to do anything during the dance, but afterwards, Raina would walk around King's Landing with Morning perched upon her shoulders and eventually riding the dragon in 135 AC. We do know that Morning was big and strong enough to basically go against the Knights of the Vale in 136 AC when Raina's husband, Sir Rowan Corbray, is killed in the Vale, and Raina's sister Bela has to make sure that her sister doesn't burn everything down for revenge. With Morning being quite young and not having done any combat, and also only living until probably 153 AC when all the dragons had died, so she lands in D tier. The dragon we do know that died in 153 AC is known as the Last Dragon, who was hatched sometime during Aegon III's reign. However, it came out looking sickly, and there are rumors that the king poisoned it since he was so afraid of dragons. We do have an estimate on how big this dragon was due to its skull being displayed on the throne room years later, which puts it at being no bigger than a mastiff's head. So this dragon goes on a new tier called L tier. Although called the Last Dragon, we all know more dragons hatched 150 years later in the events of Game of Thrones. Yep, we're talking about Daenerys Targaryen's special little babies, where 3 eggs were gifted to her, and in 299 AC, after being placed on the funeral pyre of her husband Khal Drogo, they magically hatched. One of them was Viserion, who was named after her brother Viserys. Now, the story of Game of Thrones deviate a lot from the books, and Viserion was the first to die by the hands of the Night King when he got taken over, bringing forth the Ice Dragon, which literally destroyed the 8,000-year-old wall, allowing the Night King and his army to march on, with the Night King himself as its only rider. Ice Dragon Viserion puts up a decent fight against his brothers, but ends up dying once the Night King meets his own end. All in all, we can calmly state that Viserion is a D tier due to dying so young at only 6 years, but once he ices out, he shoots up to be a solid B. Also, I'm not gonna lie, in the books, Dany's dragons aren't even like as huge as they show on the show. Like, they're supposed to be like 6 to 8 feet, but you know, Game of Thrones season 7, 8, they do insane damage to the lore. So somehow these 6 and 7-year-old dragons, especially Drogon, was the size of like Vermithor and shit. Like, that makes sense. In fact, Rhaegal, who Dany named after her brother Rhaegar, falls in a very similar position. Though in the show, Rhaegal did manage to do some substantial damage to the Ice Dragon by ripping off part of its lower jaw and neck during their bout, poetically, it is Jon Snow who rides Rhaegal, representing him being the true son of Rhaegar. But Rhaegal, like his brother, still dies a young death, where at the age of 7, he's shot with a scorpion bolt to the neck. But since the show somehow makes these 6 to 7-year-old dragons look insanely gigantic, we can assume Dany's dragons are special, and hence Rhaegal falls under C tier. Again, in the book, Rhaegal is alive and much smaller, like 7 to 8 feet small, but is stated by Barristan Selmy to be more dangerous than his brother Viserion. However, these two have nothing on their brother Drogon, who Dany named after her husband Khal Drogo. Drogon is the largest and the most aggressive out of the bunch, and is often compared to the legend of Balerion the Black Dread. In fact, Drogon becomes the dragon Dany chooses to ride. In the show, it survives till the very end after completely destroying King's Landing, winning the Battle of the Golden Road, and literally being the sole reason for Dany's victory of the Iron Throne. In fact, Drogon also saves Dany from the Sons of the Harpy, showcasing its loyalty towards her. And though it's very young, he has shown to have insane agility despite its size by dodging scorpion bolts through the sky, and when it was hit, Drogon managed to still survive. Drogon in the show is hands down A tier, probably even S, considering it's literally Balerion and we don't know when he dies. However, even after the Game of Thrones dragons, there are still wild cards we need to discuss before the final dragon. These dragons could all be placed on S tier, but their full details remain a mystery, hence wild cards. First one being Terrax, which was ridden by Jaena Baleris, who lived in Valeria before the Doom. While riding him, she spent 3 years flying through the southern continent known as Sothorios. This dragon was surely at least B tier or even higher, because Sothorios is immensely dangerous. There are creatures like wingless dragons called wyverns, the brindled half-men who are insanely formidable, and not to mention things like the basilisk and countless other monsters lurking the deeper you venture. If you guys want a deeper dive on this continent, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments. But now, this next dragon, Urax, is another formidable wildcard, having existed nearly 10,000 years ago during the time of the First Men, and according to legend, Servant of the Mirror Shield killed Urax by sneaking up on it while hiding behind his shield, which was a mirror which led the dragon to only see its reflection. But being tricked like this shows that this dragon wasn't very bright, and being slain by a human sword so easily suggests that it was no better than the dragons who died in the pits, leading me to give it D tier. A wildcard that could be placed in S tier is the dragon skull we see laid in the Red Waste during the Clash of Kings. This dragon is said to be so large that Rakaro claims to have been able to ride his horse through its jaws. And which other dragon's jaws were large enough to have horses inside? It's Balerion the Black Dread, a bona fide S tier. But our final dragon might be able to challenge him, as he's known as the Cannibal. This guy was roaming the waters near Dragonstone even before the Targaryens showed up, meaning he is much older than even Balerion, Vhagar, or Meraxes, but in size, he is still considered smaller than Vhagar and Vermithor during the dance. Yet when it comes to experience, the Cannibal might be the one with the most dragon battles, as his favorite food was literally other smaller dragons. This would give him a huge advantage against others in battles, especially since just having one dragon combat in their entire life was a rare event for most. Many would-be dragon seeds tried to ride the Cannibal, but no one succeeded. Instead, his lair was littered with human and dragon bones. Finally, after the dance in 132 AC, that was the last time people ever saw the Cannibal. It's possible that the dragon bones we saw in the Dothraki Red Waste is actually the Cannibal's skull, or it is still alive lurking in Dragonstone. So we have to put the Cannibal at S tier. But if you guys want another S tier video, watch this on screen right now. And let me know in the comments below which dragons you would put in S tier.